We left off last time kind of taking a look at the comparison between how much, you know, what are the different functions that you can set up when you have a compounded at a certain rate per year versus when you have things compounded continuously, right? And so just as a recap, whenever you compound continuously, it means like essentially every second of every minute of every day, right? So it's constant, right? It doesn't stop. It's not a fixed amount. So we looked at there's a benefit as well to having things compounded continuously, and we looked at that here because the more that something is compounded in the course of that 1 year, the larger the return happens to be. Even though it might only be a bit, maybe a couple dollars, the compounded continuously is generally to your benefit. Obviously, the more money you have saved, the larger the return you're going to get, right? But that also depends on the percent. All right, so that's kind of what we looked at last time. And today I just wanted to finish up with the CYU to finish up, finally, to finish up lesson one, right? So this has all been part of lesson one. Um, and we've gone through the 4 investigations. Okay, so after this, then we're gonna jump into lesson two, and lesson two is about credit cards, so borrowing money. And so I'll kind of show you how you can read a credit card statement. We'll kind of talk about what credit cards are. So since you guys are, you know, going to be graduating soon when you get to college, or even if, you know, you want to open up, you want to like start earning some credit, typically, you know, you open up a credit card and then, you know, you kind of want to know how to read that stuff. You don't want to just get a credit card thinking it's free money. All right. So the CYU real quick. So when Sophie was born, her parents wanted to open a savings account that would provide money to buy her a car when she turned 16 years old. Okay, they considered 2 options for their initial deposit of 2,000. Okay, so we know that their initial deposit is going to be 2,000. The first option is a credit union account that pays 2.4% interest that's compounded monthly. Okay, and then option 2 is a bank account paying 2.04%. Right, so we have a smaller percentage that the bank is going to give, but it's compounded continuously. Okay. Now, the difference between 2.04 and 2.4 might not seem like much, but remember, you're talking about over the course of 16 years. So over time, that difference between the 2.4 and the 2.04 starts to add up. Okay. So the reason why you want to be able to weigh your options is, again, you want to see which one is going to give me the larger return at the end of my, you know, my time. All right. So for part A, it's asking us which option would you recommend choosing? Okay, so let's work it out and let's see what we can come up with to determine which one is the better option. All right. So if I have for this first option here, option one, I'm being asked to compound monthly, right? And I have an APR here of 2.4%, and with an initial amount of $2,000. Okay, how could we set this up, right? Would we use the continuous formula or the regular compound interest formula? Nobody? Okay, I'll go. All right, so for option one, okay, we have an initial of 2,000. We have a rate of 2.4%, so we're gonna move that decimal over, call that 0.024. We're compounded monthly, so our end value here is going to be 12. And then we have 16 years as our time, right? So if we wanted to make a comparison, we're projecting to see how much money we could end up with in the future after 16 years. Those are the settings, right? Those are the things that we can plug into the formula. So in this case, I want a final value formula. So I want to know what am I going to end up with. So final value for a regular compound when it's at a fixed number of intervals throughout the year is going to be A times 1 plus R over N to the N times T. Okay. So let's plug in. Let's see what we get for option one. So final value here is going to give us 2,000 times 1 plus our rate, 0.024 over 12 to the 12 times 16 power. Okay. All right. We good so far? Okay. I'm going to jump on Desmos. Let me know if you actually see the Desmos. At least like give me a thumbs up or something. You guys see it?
Yeah.
Yes? Okay. Thank you. All right. So let's plug in what we know. So we know it's a $2,000 times 1 plus the rate was 0.024 all over 12 to the 12 times 16th power. Okay. All right. So after those 16 years, it looks like she's going to be able to save about $29.35 with 17 cents. Okay. It's $29.35. Okay. So that's her final value at a 2.4% interest rate. It's compounded monthly. Okay. So again, why does it seem like such a small amount? It's because they only deposited 2,000 and then they never deposited any more money, right? So they just let the money sit there and let it kind of build up over time. All right. So since there is no monthly recurring deposit, you're not going to see such a huge growth. Okay. So then that's option one, right? But we want to make the comparison now. What's option two? And then which one's the better option, right? So for option two now we're discussing the potential to have a continuously compounded, right? But we have a smaller interest rate. Okay, so we need to see which one is going to outweigh the other. Is it better to have it compounded continuously with a lower rate, or is it better to have it compounded monthly at a higher rate, right? We need to weigh those options because just because something is compounded continuously doesn't automatically make it better. You have to see what the interest rate is because at a lower interest rate, even if things are compounded continuously, you might not generate as much return as you would with a higher interest rate that is not compounded as often. Okay, so don't let the continuously compounded fool you into thinking that it's always the better option when it might not always be the case. All right, so option two this time, let's go red. All right, we still have the same initial deposit, which is 2,000. Okay, but this time the rate is going to be 0.0204. Okay, slightly smaller. This time we don't have an n value because it's compounded continuously, so we're going to have to use the formula that involves e. Okay, so we don't need to use an n value. And then the time, we're still considering this over the course of 16 years. All right, so then in this case, the final value formula is going to be f equal to a times e to the rt. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead, plug things in. I have f equal to 2,000 times e. Remember, e is a constant value. It's a number that is recognized by the calculator, so we don't need to do the substitution of the approximate value. Leave it as e. The rate will be 0.0204, and the time will be 16. Okay, so the continuously compounded formula is much easier to kind of remember, and there's not as much involved. Okay, so now final value here. Let's go ahead and plug this into the Desmos calculator and see what we got. So 2,000 times e, right, to the 0.0204 times the 16th power. All right. So you see there, smaller return, right? Even though it was compounded continuously, the fact that you had a smaller interest rate didn't allow you to generate as much return over the course of those 16 years, right? So that's kind of what I was mentioning before. Compounded continuously isn't always the better deal, especially if the interest rate is lower, okay? That's always one of the big factors. It's like, what is the interest rate? Because that's going to determine how much it's growing per year, all right? So Let's go back. What is it? 2771 with 94. Okay. So obviously we can say here that the better option, right? Option one is the better option. Is the better option because it generates a greater return on, oops, a greater return on the initial investment. Okay. Right, so I would recommend option one over option two, right? It's a difference of almost like $150. So any questions there? How we doing? Okay. All right, so then obviously option one is going to be the better choice. Question B now is asking, what is the APY? What is the annual percentage yield of the credit union account and then of the bank account, right? So option one is a credit union, and then option two is the bank account. Okay, so think of it as like a big bank like Bank of America versus like Schools First, which is a credit union, right? A lot of teachers use Schools First. So, right, you have your big bank versus like your small bank, okay? So let's find out what the APY would be, all right? So the APY is just the annual percentage yield, right? So what is the true percentage that you're earning per year, all right? So what we can do in that case is, well, let's find out we made as a return in just 1 year, and then from there we can determine like how much money did it grow in that 1 year, and then we convert that back to a percent. Okay, so that's kind of the process for part B. So when we're looking for APY, okay, APY of option one, and then the APY of option two. All right, and we just want to compare. Okay, so we have this final value formula, but in this case, I don't want to see what the full amount is going to be over 16 years. I just want to know what it's going to be after 1 year. All right, so maybe just after the first year is going to be good enough for now, because that's going to tell us at least the growth rate. All right, so final value formula here, I'm going to reuse it. F equals 2000 times 1 plus 0.024 all over 12 to the 12 times, and this time for time I'm going to just use 1, right? Because I want to know what is the amount of money that I generated in just 1 year. All right, so then in this case, let's find out. I'm going to go up here and just change this back to 1. All right, same formula, just that the time, the years is different. So we have 1 year, so then that's 2048 with 53 cents. So 2048 with 53 cents. Okay, so then if I want to find out what the annual percentage yield was, well, how much interest did I really earn in 1 year, then what you want to do is we'll find the difference. Find the difference between your final value and your initial investment. So you're going to take final value, which was your $2,048.53. You're going to subtract from that what you initially invested, which was 2,000. Why do you subtract from that? Because then that tells you how much money you actually grew by in that 1 year. So the growth that you grew by is only $48.53. Okay, but the annual percentage yield has to result in the terms of a I'm sorry, not decimal, a percentage. Okay, so then your percentage has to be in terms of like, well, how much did I grow compared to how much I initially deposited, right? So whatever I initially deposited ends up being the denominator here. So you divide this total, this $48.53 by 2,000. And that's going to tell you what percentage you grew by. Okay, so then in this case, let me utilize this calculator here. 48.53 divided by the 2,000. Okay, and so what you're looking at there is that's the decimal, right? That's the decimal growth, and then we can convert it back to a percentage. So it's 0.02426. Okay. Okay, so then when you convert that back to a decimal, what you're looking at is a percentage growth of 2.426%, right? So remember that APR is the projected rate, right? This is what it's going to be growing at, but APY truly tells you how much money it grew by in that 1 year. Okay, so in this case, what you grew by is actually a little bit larger than what the APR predicted, right? The APR told you 2.4 and you actually grew by 2.426. Okay, so that little point, that little 26 at the end makes a difference in terms of accumulating some money for you. So that's the annual percentage yield for the first option, right? I believe this is the credit union. Um, you guys hear that stuff in the background? It's getting kind of loud for me, so I'm just asking if is it too distracting? No? Is it okay? All right. As long as you guys can still hear me. All right, so now for second option, let's find out what that annual percentage yield would be. So again, we're gonna set up, in this case, the final value formula for the second option. In this case, that final value was utilizing the formula that has E in it, right? So we have 2,000 times E to the 0.0204, and then this time we're only multiplying times 1 year, okay? So let's see what this final value gives us. Right, we can change this just to a 1. So it's 2041 with 22 cents. Okay, so now go ahead and find your difference here, right? So you can tell that from the initial 2000, you've grown by about $41.22. So you don't even necessarily need to do a subtraction or something like this because it looks pretty simple. But just to kind of show the steps, 2041.22, subtract the 2000 from that. That gets you your growth, right? That's how much you grew by. But then all of this is divided by the initial amount that you invested. Okay, so now the growth for us, this is going to be 41.22 divided by the 2000. And so this results in something smaller. So this is 0.02061. Okay, so then if you convert this to a decimal now, you're looking at 2.061%. Right, and then this is your APY. For the account that grows at a continuous rate, right? That is compounding continuously. You're not seeing as large of a growth every year, right? You're only growing by about 2.061% versus 2.426%. Okay, so that's they kind of match up similarly with what the APRs were. So this right here is we get AP. Oh wait. This is our APY. This is our APY. But the comparative APR Here it was 2.4%, and here the APR was 2.04%. Okay. All right. Any questions on that so far? Okay. All right. And then finally, let's take a look at these last two parts. Okay, so then part C, it says based on the answer to part A, what is the approximate price of a car that she can purchase? Okay, well, you have your final values there, so you can determine that pretty easily. Okay, option one, she can buy a car that's about $29.35. Option two, she can buy a car that's $27.71. Right, so probably a used car, something that has kind of a cheap price tag. All right, and then clearly here for part D, it says how much interest would the credit union account earn in 16 years? Okay, well, if you initially invested in the 2000, well, the amount of interest that was earned, right, is everything else that got you to the final value, right? So for something like part D, it's pretty simple to answer that because you take your 29.35 and 17 and you subtract 2000 from that because 2000 was what you initially invested, right? So then all of the interest that was earned is the remaining amount, which would be the $935.17, right? For the other scenario, you have the 2771 with 94 cents, and if you subtract out the initial amount that you deposited, then you earned $771.94 in interest, right? So these two amounts right here, this is what you're earning in interest over the course of that lifetime, 16 years. Okay. All right. Okay. So that kind of wraps us up for that lesson. Okay. Are there any questions about what we just did? All right, cool. All right, so let's move on to the next unit. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. Okay, so this right here is super important to learn how to read. Okay, so if and when if some of you maybe already have like bank accounts, you might get a statement similar to this, but especially if you have a credit card. So just to kind of briefly go over the difference between a debit card and a credit card. So a debit card is something that's linked to your checking account. So let's say you have a checking account with Wells Fargo, and let's say your checking account has, let's just say like $800 in it, okay? That means that your debit card can only spend what is inside of the account, okay? So basically it's like your debit card is your cash, right? Whatever you have in the account, that's what you can spend. So if you try to go and buy a TV at Costco that was maybe worth like $1,000 and you only had $800 in the account and you try to pay with a debit card, the debit card would decline because the debit card would automatically read that you don't have enough money in the account to pay for the item, right? And so that's sometimes you might hear things like, oh, like your card declined. Well, that's because either somebody was probably paying with a debit card and they just didn't have enough in the account. That's a debit card. Okay, so that's usually for like everyday purchases. People that have, you buy your groceries, you buy your gas, things like that. Like most people don't put gas and groceries on credit cards unless they maybe it's like the end of the month and they're still waiting for the check to come in and they really need to buy food, things like that. Like kind of emergency situations. But a debit card is your everyday spending, right? You go to You go to the movies, maybe you buy like tickets with the debit card, that kind of thing. Credit cards, on the other hand, um, is borrowed money. All right. So when you apply for a credit card, typically when you're younger, you might get approved for a credit card, um, but you get very small credit limits. So, like for example, when I first opened my first credit card, my credit card limit was, I think it was like $300, right? Because I was brand new. It was like my first ever credit card. I think I was like 19 at the time, 19 or 20 or so. So I didn't, I had a job, but it was like part time. I didn't really get paid a whole lot. So they ask you certain questions when you apply for a credit card. And so they ask your address, they ask how much do you pay in rent, and they want to know how much money you make a year. All right. So obviously, if you're not making a whole lot of money in a year, the credit card company's like, well, we're not going to give this person a $10,000 credit limit when they only make like 4,000 a year, right? Let's say you're working part time. So, right, because there's no way that you're going to be able to pay all that money off with your maybe part time job. So, depending on how much money you make, that's how much credit you're going to be given. All right. So, the credit is basically like, okay, here is, right? So let's say the credit card that I first applied to, they said like, here is $300 credit, which means that I could make purchases up to $300. But then once I reach that limit, I can't continue to make purchases. The thing is that that money is borrowed. So once I make a purchase, so let's say I go to Best Buy, right? And I buy, I don't know, something that's close to 300 bucks. Maybe I buy like some headphones, like some Beats headphones. Let's say that they were like 250, right? So I get to walk out of the store right away with the item, but it's then something that I'm gonna get billed for later. So then I'm gonna get billed for it maybe in a couple weeks, or if you have online banking, you see it show up maybe in a couple of business days. So it'll show up, right? And that's what you call a balance, right? That is your balance. So that's something that then you have to pay back. All right.
Why
Um,
would you get billed for it though?
what happened?
Why would you get billed for it though?
If I paid it with a credit card, I would get billed for it because credit cards are borrowed money. A debit card
Oh,
is something that is gonna instantly get taken and withdrawn out of your account. Do you see the
oh.
difference?
See, I'd be using my mama's card, so I wouldn't know.
You've been using your what?
My mama's card, so I don't know.
You've been using your mom's card?
Yeah. The thing when Savage came out, mister?
21. What?
Yeah, it came up on the screen.
Hold on, I couldn't hear what you were saying.
That your 21 Savage came out on the screen.
My 21 Savage came out on the screen?
Yeah, like it said that you were listening to 21 Savage.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. That sounds cool. I like it.
Can you hear my music? Or
Sounds like my friend.
my mom? Oh, I don't mute myself.
Sounds like you're at the LA Fairman.
It's very crazy.
All right. So anyway, back to this, right? So anytime you make a purchase with a credit card, you are going to get billed for that later. So be very careful with credit cards because a lot of times especially when you go to new college campuses, there's people on the campuses that are like, hey, open up a credit card. We have a promotion for students. And a lot of times people don't explain well what a credit card is. People, when you're young, you think it's like, oh, I have this credit card. I could just go buy stuff with it, right? But then you don't realize like you're basically just racking up debt, stuff that you have to pay back later. And the problem with that is that not only do you have to pay back what you owed, but the credit cards start charging you interest if you don't pay it all back in that first month. Okay, so that's kind of what this first example is going to walk you through. All right, so let me just kind of read off what we have. So each year, more and more colleges are requiring entering students to have their own laptops and appropriate software, right? That's very true. When you start college, the expectation is that you have access to a computer and mostly a laptop, something that you can bring to class, you can use portably. So even if you have like a desktop at home, sometimes that could be troublesome because you want to bring it to class and you want to be able to, type notes or whatever, or work on stuff in between classes on the campus. So typically one of the big costs when you first start college is having like a laptop, right? Something a little bit more practical than a Chromebook, so maybe like sometimes a Mac, maybe a Windows, maybe a Surface, right? Something that's within your price range, though. So after careful comparative research, Natalie purchases a laptop, some software, right? Maybe like Microsoft Office, right? So you have Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, that kind of thing. A case, and then extended warranty to last her 4 years, right? So sometimes it's good to get some warranty in case you accidentally spill something on your laptop or whatever. So she paid for the purchase with a recently acquired credit card. Okay. Study Natalie's credit card billing statement below. The only purchase during the previous billing cycle was the laptop, software case, and extended warranty. Okay, so let me kind of walk you through what's going on here. So I want you to first notice what's happening over here on the right side. So it says here that there was a previous balance, which is that previously, before she made all of these purchases, she owed $450, right? That's what this represents right here. That was the previous balance. So maybe the month before. But she made a payment. She made a payment here for this amount, right? So she made a payment of $450. So it kind of didn't set her back. It didn't set her back. I'm sorry. She paid $450, so now she didn't owe any more money, right? So maybe that $450 that she had spent earlier, whatever, she paid it all back. Now she's at zero, right? So she doesn't owe the credit card company anything. But then she starts school. So then she has to go and buy all of these extra things to get her started, right? So then now it's going to show up as new charges, right? So every billing cycle, which is typically about 30 days, every 30 days, you're going to get a statement that tells you what your new charges were. Okay, so it tells you what you owed before, how much you paid before, and then whatever is new. Okay, so sometimes you make a payment, but then it's like, oh, but I need to buy this thing too, and then you put another thing on the credit card. Okay, so it's keeping track of like what you've spent, what you've paid off, but then also if you bought anything new within the past month. All right, and because she just bought this stuff, this is still within the first month that she bought it. So far, she hasn't incurred any interest, right? There's no interest and there's no fees. The interest starts to rack up. Let's say I'm in the month of right now, month of April. Okay, I'm in the month of April. Let's say I buy something. I would have until about today's the 28th. I would have until May 28th to pay it completely off. But once it jumps into the next month, then interest is going to start to roll into the account. They're going to start charging me interest. And so this is where the biggest challenge comes in, is like, how do you manage your credit card debt so that you're not constantly paying all this interest, because interest is not anything related to what you actually bought. This is the bank making money off of you because you chose to buy something on a credit card because maybe you didn't have the cash up front. So this is how the banks make their money, because they borrow money to you short term, but then you have to pay them back what you paid for, what you bought, plus a little bit extra, right? So every month you're maybe paying a couple extra dollars, and so it adds up, right? And so imagine now millions of people doing that. The bank is rolling in a ton of money. All right, so that's the left side, okay? Typically what you really want to focus on is how much do I owe and how much do I owe this month, right? Because typically when you buy things on credit is because you know that, okay, I know I have a job and I can pay things over time, but I can't pay it all right now. So I can at least make maybe a payment of like $200 each month, and then let me see how, it might take me maybe 10 months to pay it off, but that's better than not having what I need right now. Okay, so then here's your new balance. Here's what you owe. Okay, you're always going to see that right there. New balance. This is how much you owe in total. Okay, now this right here, this is the part that gets most people, the minimum payment due. And you see this amount and you think, okay, that's not too bad. That's not even $50. I can make that payment every month. Now the problem is that it's a minimum payment, which means you have to send at least that. But a lot of people get trapped into thinking that that's the only amount of money they can send, which is not true. If you had, let's say, I don't know, you got a bonus check for whatever job you were doing, right? Let's say it was like holidays, you got a bonus check, and you got a bonus check of like $800, right? And you decided like, okay, I want to send this 800 to pay off my credit card. You can do that. You can send as much money as you want towards the credit card to pay off the balance. But you don't have to just pay the minimum only. And if you pay the minimum only, there's a part down at the bottom that tells you how long it's going to take you if you only send the minimum payment. So watch this. Okay. So the due date, right? You have to submit it by that date. Okay, so this used to be an issue with people that used to pay their credit cards by check. They would have to write a check, send the payment. They would have to mail it out at least a week in advance. Now you have electronic payment that can just take it out right away. So the payment due date is as long as you submit it by that date, you're fine. You won't get any charged any fees because there are late fees, right? So they give you a late fee warning that if you don't pay by the certain date, you're gonna have to pay a fee of up to $35 just on late fees, and then your percentage. Notice this, that your purchase APR may be increased to the penalty of 27.24%. Imagine that. If you make a one late payment, they could jack up your interest rate from whatever it was at the moment up to 27%. That's huge, right? Because typically when you're paying like the first few months of a credit card, the interest rate might be like 1%, 1.5%. It's small, because they're basically splitting it up as if like this person's going to take about a year to pay it off. But imagine then that you get that jacked up to 27%. Like, it's crazy. Okay, so people get trapped in that sometimes and they can't get out of credit card debt. So always want to make your payments on time, even if it's a minimum, right? Let's say you're strapped for a certain month, make sure you make that minimum payment at least by that date, so you don't get interest and you don't get fees. All right. Okay, then they give you another warning that says minimum payment warning. Okay, so if you only make the minimum payment each period, you will pay more in interest. Okay, that is true. You will pay more in interest and it will take you longer to pay off the balance. Okay, so imagine that you went and you bought your laptop, you bought a case, you bought necessities, right? These are things that you desperately need. It's not like you went and you bought a bunch of like designer shoes, right? Which is like, okay, you don't really need that. This is an investment because you're going to use it for school. Now imagine that you're only paying the minimum every month. It tells you down here how long it's going to take you. Okay, if you only make the minimum payment, right? If you have no additional charges, by the way, right? If it's only this balance, and you don't put anything else on the credit card, and you're only making the minimum payment, it's going to take you 7 years and 4 months to pay off that balance. Imagine, right? 7 years of paying $50 a month, basically, just to pay off a laptop that you probably need to replace by now, right? 7 years later. Okay, and then notice that right here they're telling you here's how much you are gonna pay in reality if you only make minimum payments. Right, when your balance was only $1,935, but if you're only making minimum payments, you're actually going to pay $3,263. So why is that? That's all of the interest that you're paying on top of what you actually bought. Right, it's about $1,300 just in interest, and the balance was 1,900. So you're basically paying almost as much in interest as you are for the laptop and all the other gear, because you only paid the minimum payment. Okay, so that is like the number one rule on credit cards. If you get a bill, do not think that you can only make the minimum. Make the payment about as big as you can and try to get it off as soon as possible so that you avoid paying a lot of interest. Okay, um, so that's just a general rule of thumb. Okay, and then they offer like this like suggestion down here where it says like, well, what if instead you pay $69? Well, it's only going to take you 3 years, and then you're going to pay $24.57. That's still a ridiculous amount of money to pay in interest, right? It's like you're giving the bank money for free because you've chosen to make really small payments. Okay, so be careful about how you choose to use a credit card, because this is how people kind of run into problems and they end up having to declare bankruptcy, things like that. If you're going to buy something with a credit card, make sure that number one, it's something that, okay, if you want it, make sure that you can pay it off within the next 3 to 4 months. Okay, something that you can pay off relatively quickly, right? Like if you're working, I know I'm making this much, this is what I'm paying on my bills, but I know I can then send a big amount to my credit card. So like if some of you guys want to go to festivals, music concerts, sometimes those 3-day festivals like Coachella is like $600, right? So who has $600 up front? Not a whole lot of people. So what happens? People buy Coachella on credit cards. But if you buy Coachella tickets early in the spring, by the time Coachella comes around, maybe you've already paid it off. But that might require you to make payments of like $250 a month, right? But you're not paying just $15 a month, which is going to take you forever. All right. So you definitely want to read what some of that stuff is on there, and most statements look like this. Okay. Now on the other side, let me fill you in on what the other part is telling you. So right here, this is the credit limit. The limit is how much money you can put on the credit card, right? You can keep spending and spending on the credit card, but you're gonna be capped at a certain amount. All right. So let's say you're buying like furniture, you buy a new TV, you buy some speakers, you buy a couch, you buy some gaming equipment, I don't know, and your credit limit is 5,000, that means you can only spend 5,000 on that credit card. Okay? That's the maximum that they're going to allow you to put on that credit card. Why? Because it all depends on how much money you're making, right? So a person who got $5,000 credit limit, the company is being like, okay, this is how much we project is probably a good amount to let you borrow, because if we make a limit that is higher and you don't make as much, then you might end up being that person that is like constantly making minimum payments, and you're never going to be able to like dig your way out of that hole. Okay. And the last thing the credit cards company want to do is let you borrow money and then you declare bankruptcy, and then all of a sudden the bank lost that money. I mean, yeah, they lost that money and then you still got to keep the items. All right. So that's what they're trying to avoid as well. They want to make sure they get their money back. Okay. Then you see below that there's this thing called available credit. Available credit is a little bit different because the credit limit was 5,000, but you've put $1,900 worth of, you've already bought $1,900 worth of stuff. So think about it as like, okay, I've already spent 2,000. So then whatever is available to me to still spend is like about $3,000. All right. So they just kind of deduct it. So the available credit is your credit limit minus your new balance. And that's how you can see what is it that you can still put on that credit card. Okay. And then you have these other things down here that say cash advance limit. So that's, let's say you're strapped for cash. Um, right? You need cash desperately. Like there's something you need to buy that you have to pay cash. Maybe it's like auto repair or whatever, something that you need the cash and they don't let you pay with a credit card. You can ask the credit card for a cash advance. So they'll send you a check that you can then deposit into your checking account. You can then withdraw it as cash and you can make the payment for whatever it is that you might need. Okay. However, that's something that then you have to pay back to the credit card. And then usually that has a higher interest rate as well. Okay. So they give you that as an option. And when you open up a credit card, they'll send you like this book with tons of pages of like legal, like jargon, and you have to read through it and make sense of it. Um, but that's basically how your credit card report will look like month after month. Okay. So I know that was a lot, but are there questions on this about credit cards in general, reading your statement? This is super, super important, like just life skill. Any questions for me?